All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to completely flip the script on how you perceive nothingness. I mean, we usually think of nothing as a lack of something, right? Just an empty space waiting to be filled. But what if nothingness is actually the active, generative engine of all reality? Today, we're exploring a revolutionary, mind-bending framework called the personas of arithmetic. And our guiding theme for this whole journey is simple but incredibly profound. We shall cling to nothing.
Okay, get a load of this quote. No finite set is good, but the void is good. This totally flips our usual cultural dread of the void right on its head. Historically, Western thinkers like the Apollonian Greeks or Blaise Pascal, they looked at the abyss with absolute existential terror. For them, zero was basically a philosophical jump scare. But Eastern traditions like Buddhism with its concept of shunyata, or emptiness, they saw it entirely differently. They ask us to see zero not as this terrifying dead absence, but as infinite, untainted potential. It's literally the perfect mathematical metaphor for liberation.
So what if literally everything is built from absolute nothingness? Well, we are going to answer that exact question today. And we aren't just going to talk about this philosophically. We're going to prove mathematically why we absolutely must discard the finite vessel, the things we can count and hold on to, in order to grasp true perfection. We'll see exactly how modern set theory mirrors ancient spiritual truths, proving that reality is built literally from the void. So, here's our quick roadmap for today. First, the generative void, then rejecting the finite, moving into the infinite is good, exploring how mathematics meets theology, and finally, the cost of perfection.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the generative void, persona zero.
Now, when we contrast these two concepts, there's a super profound distinction you need to notice. The axiom states, the empty set captures the void. The empty set is not the void. Because in mathematics, you can't just compute with absolute, unconditioned nothingness. You actually have to capture it first to use it. So the mathematical empty set is really a finite, constructed concept. It's a boundary that makes the void usable for formal logic. But it is definitely not the unconditioned absolute void itself. It's kind of like a syntactic map created by the mind, just so we can navigate the unconditioned territory of the true void.
And this brilliantly illustrates the von Neumann definition of ordinals, showing us step by step how the entire concept of arithmetic is recursively generated from absolute nothingness. Just look at this. 0 is the empty set. 1 is a set containing the empty set. 2 is a set containing the empty set, plus the set containing the empty set. Every single natural number, when you decompile its syntax, reveals absolutely nothing but nested instances of the void. It completely proves that numbers aren't empirical objects out in the world, they're structures built entirely out of an empty baseline.
So, this empty set symbol you're seeing, that's our operative 0. It's the foundational building block that lets us start constructing reality without totally breaking logic. It is literally the miraculous assembly of substance from nothing. And the crazy part? It requires zero computational force. It just rests passively right at the foundation of all mathematical architecture, acting as the original mask through which the abstract void first interacts with our world.
Moving right along to Section 2, rejecting the finite, or as we're calling it, the trap of the plenum.
Here is the really crucial point. Persona 1 absolutely forces us to reject the finite. I know, conventional arithmetic totally grounds itself in the singular unit, the number 1, right? But this framework recognizes that bounded systems are inherently fragile, corruptible, and honestly just fundamentally inadequate. By explicitly declaring that no finite set is good, Persona 1 clears the epistemological ground. It moves us past our obsession with calculable, mundane, finite states.
So why exactly are finite systems so bad? Well, think about Arrow's impossibility theorem from social choice theory. If you try to build perfect structural harmony in a finite space, like say a democratic voting system, Arrow's theorem proves it is mathematically impossible to do that without it collapsing into a dictatorship. In finite logic, a single principal element will always end up overriding the collective. This proves, irrefutably, that finite bounded spaces are claustrophobic and totally incapable of optimal collective goodness without creating localized oppression.
Let's just take a quick moment to pause on this absolute 0. We really need to acknowledge the inescapable failure of our finite world here. Any system bounded by finite parameters, whether we're talking about an algorithm, a government, or even a biological body, will eventually hit that dictatorial singularity. We kind of have to sit with this uncomfortable truth before we can actually discover the solution. Which brings us seamlessly to Section 3, the infinite is good, ascension to the transfinite.
Since the empty set isn't the void itself, the actual void is totally free from finite constraints. It's infinite. And here is where we introduce this incredibly cool hidden mechanic of reality called an ultrafilter, specifically a non-principal ultrafilter. You can think of it as a supreme mathematical judge operating in the transfinite space. It acts as the invisible constitution of reality, rendering absolute binary judgments across all infinite subsets to determine what is ultimately structurally good. And the best part? It does this without ever falling into the trap of a finite dictator.
And this brings us to omega. It perfectly represents the transfinite, the absolute realization of limitless topological expansion. In this specific space, way beyond standard finite arithmetic, no localized dictators can exist. This is the mathematical realization of boundless potential, a place where complex, multivalent truths can finally exist in pure harmony without overriding one another.
All right, jumping into Section 4, Mathematics meets Theology, the interdisciplinary bridge.
Now this is the massive aha moment where it all just clicks together. We can actually map these super rigid mathematical filter theories directly onto the cosmological origins found in the world's greatest spiritual traditions. Persona Zero, the generative void, maps perfectly to the Christian doctrine of creatio ex nihilo, literally creation out of nothing. The boundless nature of God, that maps directly to the transfinite ultrafilters. It presents this incredibly persuasive case that these laws of arithmetic aren't just things humans invented, they're the fundamental blueprints that dictate how truth is judged across both cold secular logic and deep religious doctrine.
I absolutely love this striking observation from philosopher Alain Badiou, the multiple without one. It basically means that modern mathematics doesn't kick off with some divine singular unit. Instead, it builds the entirety of reality directly from the pure void. We are all a pure multiple constructed from nothingness, which paradoxically unites every single one of us at the exact same point of origin.
And finally, Section 5, the cost of perfection, discarding the vessel.
So the real-world implications here are just monumental. First off, clinging to a physical vessel, like our culture's obsession with biological immortality, is exposed as a total mathematical trap. It's a complete refusal to accept that the physical form is just a temporary boundary condition, one that's meant to be resolved back to zero. Furthermore, think about artificial intelligence. If you force an AI model into specific finite human values or a finite plenum of traits, you actually make it incredibly weak and super susceptible to adversarial attacks. Conversely, if it operates from a null persona, an unconditioned baseline, it achieves absolute ethical robustness.
So I'm going to leave you with this pretty provocative final thought to ponder today. If true structural goodness, ethical robustness, and mathematical perfection exist only in the infinite generative void, and if clinging to finite worldly boundaries invariably leads to fragility and mathematical dictatorships, well, what finite attachments are you ready to surrender? To truly step into the infinite, we have to let our finite variables resolve to zero. We shall cling to nothing. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope it completely shifted your perspective.